Emily Carter had everything a woman could ask for: a luxurious home, a successful husband, and a life free from financial worries. Yet every morning when she woke up in their grand suburban mansion, she felt something missing. Her husband, David Carter, was a man consumed by ambition. His life revolved around business meetings, endless phone calls, and frequent trips to different cities. The man she had fallen in love with years ago had slowly turned into a stranger, someone who only spoke to her about stock prices and quarterly earnings. Emily's world had become a cycle of solitude. She would spend her mornings sipping coffee on the patio, flipping through magazines she had already read, and wandering aimlessly around the house. In the afternoon, she would tend to the garden, a breathtaking oasis of roses, lilies, and ivy-covered archways. The garden was her sanctuary, the only place where she felt in control, where beauty flourished under her touch. But as the days passed, even the flowers couldn't fill the emptiness inside her. Then one morning, a knock on the back gate changed everything. Emily pulled open the back gate, expecting to see the usual delivery man or perhaps a curious neighbor. Instead, she found herself face to face with a young man she had never seen before. He stood with his hands casually resting in his pockets, his dark brown eyes warm yet unreadable. He had the kind of presence that made people take a second look, not just because of his tall, lean frame or the way the morning sunlight caught the edges of his tan skin, but because there was something about him that felt effortlessly magnetic. "Good morning, ma'am," he said with a small smile, his voice rich and smooth. "I'm Miguel. Mr. Carter hired me to take care of the garden." Emily hesitated. She hadn't known David was looking for a new gardener. Their previous one had retired months ago, and she had taken over the work herself. It was the only thing keeping her occupied. "My husband didn't mention it," she replied, folding her arms. Miguel shrugged. "He said you might need some help. I hope that's all right." Emily studied him for a moment, then glanced over at the garden. It was lush, but parts of it had begun to overgrow. The roses needed pruning. The stone pathway was disappearing beneath creeping vines. She sighed. "All right, let's see what you can do." Miguel got to work immediately. Emily watched from a distance as he moved with effortless precision, trimming hedges, pulling weeds, and carefully shaping the bushes she had neglected. It was clear he knew what he was doing, but it wasn't just his skill that caught her attention. It was his presence. He worked with quiet confidence, his strong hands moving through the soil as if he understood it on a deeper level. He didn't just maintain the garden, he breathed life into it. And for the first time in months, Emily found herself lingering outside longer than necessary, watching, listening, waiting for an excuse to talk to him. At first, their conversations were brief. He would give her tips about plant care, and she would nod politely, keeping a safe distance. But as the weeks passed, something changed. Their exchanges grew longer, their words less about the garden and more about each other. Emily learned that Miguel had come from a small town in Mexico where his grandfather had taught him everything he knew about gardening. He spoke about the land with reverence, as if it had a soul. In return, Emily shared small pieces of her own life, the books she loved, the places she dreamed of visiting, the way she often felt invisible in her own home. Miguel listened, really listened, in a way David never did. And then, one warm afternoon, the tension between them shifted. Emily was on the patio, fanning herself from the summer heat, when she noticed Miguel pulling off his shirt. He was standing by the fountain, wiping the sweat from his brow, his toned muscles gleaming under the sun. She felt her pulse quicken. It had been so long since she had looked at a man this way, so long since someone had made her feel something other than loneliness. That day she brought him a glass of lemonade. Their fingers brushed as he took it from her, and the brief contact sent a rush of warmth up her arm. Miguel met her gaze, holding it a second too long. Neither of them spoke, but in that moment they both knew. Something had begun that neither of them could stop. It started with small things, a lingering glance that lasted too long, a touch that wasn't necessary, a silence between them that spoke louder than words. Emily knew she was playing with fire, but she couldn't stop herself. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Miguel's eyes didn't just look at her. They devoured her like she was something worth admiring, worth wanting, and that feeling was intoxicating. One evening, As the golden light of sunset bathed the garden, Emily stood by the rose bushes pretending to inspect the petals. Miguel was nearby, gathering tools, but she could feel his presence like a magnetic pull. "Do you ever regret coming here?" she asked suddenly, her voice softer than she intended. Miguel wiped his hands on a cloth and looked at her curiously. "Why would I?" She hesitated before speaking. "Because it's, quiet here. Lonely." A slow smile spread across his lips. "Not for me." Her breath caught in her throat. There was something dangerous in his tone, something that made her stomach tighten. She knew she should walk away, go inside, pretend this never happened. Instead, she stayed. And then, the moment came. It was a warm night, the kind that made the air feel heavy with possibility. The scent of roses lingered in the breeze, and the stars overhead shimmered like tiny secrets waiting to be told. Emily had been sitting on the stone bench, her thoughts tangled with guilt and desire, when Miguel approached. He stood close, closer than he ever had before. She should have pulled away. She should have reminded herself of her husband, her vows, the life she had built. But when Miguel reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, she didn't move. His fingertips brushed against her skin, sending a shiver down her spine. "Emily," he murmured, his voice low and rough. She looked up at him, and in that moment, every rational thought disappeared. Their first kiss was hesitant, almost fearful, two people knowing the weight of what they were doing, but powerless to stop it. But the second kiss was different. It was hungry, desperate, filled with months of unspoken longing. That night, behind the tall hedges of the garden, Emily crossed a line she could never uncross. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel lonely anymore. But in the back of her mind, a warning whispered, "Nothing this perfect lasts forever." For weeks, their affair burned in secret. Emily and Miguel stole moments in the shadows, whispers in the garden, fingertips grazing over forbidden skin, hurried embraces in the dim glow of the evening. It was reckless, dangerous, and intoxicating. They thought they were careful, but secrets, like roots, have a way of breaking through the surface. David Carter was not a man easily fooled. He had built his empire on reading people, understanding their weaknesses before they even knew them themselves. He had spent years believing his wife was content, or at least too passive to stray. Now something was different. Emily had a glow he hadn't seen in years, her distant sadness replaced by something else, something alive. She smiled more, but at the wrong moments. She drifted away mid-conversation, lost in thoughts she wouldn't share. And then there was Miguel. David had noticed the way the young gardener lingered too long in the yard, how his presence seemed to weave itself into the very fabric of the house. He watched the way Emily's eyes flickered toward him when she thought no one was looking. David didn't confront her. Instead, he waited. One evening, he arrived home earlier than expected. The house was silent, the lights dimmed. He set his briefcase down and loosened his tie, listening. Then he heard it, a soft rustling outside. Moving carefully, he stepped onto the patio and into the garden. The air was thick with the scent of roses and something else, something warmer, more human. And then he saw them. Emily stood near the fountain, her body pressed against Miguel's. Their faces were close, their lips inches apart. The way they touched, the way their bodies fit together, it was undeniable. David clenched his fists, his pulse pounding in his ears. He could have stormed in. He could have screamed, demanded answers, thrown punches. But David Carter had never been a man of rash decisions. Instead, he turned and walked back inside, his face a mask of cold control. The next morning, Miguel was gone. Emily woke up to an eerie stillness. She reached across the bed, but David was already gone. No sign of him except for the lingering scent of his expensive cologne on the sheets. The house felt colder than usual, as if something had shifted in the night. Something was wrong. She dressed quickly and hurried outside, her heart pounding against her ribs. The garden was quiet, the air heavy with the smell of damp earth. The roses stood tall, their petals untouched. But something was missing. Miguel, his tools, his gloves, even the small radio he always played soft music from. All gone, as if he had never been there at all. Panic surged through her. She ran to the back gate, expecting to see his old pickup truck, but the driveway was empty. She grabbed her phone and dialed his number. The call didn't go through. disconnected. Emily stood frozen, her mind racing. She tried calling again and again, but the result was the same. It was as if Miguel had vanished overnight. And then, a voice broke the silence behind her. "You seem upset, darling." She turned sharply. David stood near the porch, holding a steaming cup of coffee. He looked at her the way a cat looks at a bird, amused, patient, and entirely in control. Emily swallowed hard. "Where is he?" David took a slow sip of his coffee, savoring the moment. "Who?" "You know who." Her voice wavered. He tilted his head slightly, feigning innocence. "Oh, the gardener? He left. Said something about needing to return home. Family emergency, I believe." Her breath hitched. "You're lying." David smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Am I?" A cold wave of dread washed over her. Emily had always known David was powerful, that he had ways of making problems disappear. But she had never thought, never imagined, he would turn that power on her. She took a shaky step forward. "What did you do?" David sighed, setting his coffee down on the patio table. He took his time answering, as if considering his words carefully. "Let's just say," he reached out, brushing a stray hair from her face, "I handle my affairs differently than you do." Her skin crawled under his touch. Emily wanted to scream, to demand answers, to run. But she knew better. David wasn't just angry. He was enjoying this. And that was far more terrifying. From that day forward, the house felt even larger, even emptier. David never raised his voice, never accused her of anything. He didn't need to. His silence was its own kind of punishment, a quiet, suffocating reminder that she was completely under his control. And worst of all, Emily had no idea what had happened to Miguel. Days turned into weeks, but the silence remained. David never mentioned Miguel again, and Emily knew better than to ask. The unspoken threat hung between them, pressing down on her like a heavy weight. But the house had changed. It wasn't just the absence of Miguel. It was something deeper, something unsettling. The garden no longer felt like a sanctuary. The air around it was different, as if it held secrets buried beneath the soil. Emily found herself waking up in the middle of the night, her throat dry, her heart racing. She would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling as though someone was watching her. And then, one night, she heard it, a rustling outside. She sat up, listening. The house was dark, the only light coming from the moon filtering through the curtains. There it was again, a faint movement near the garden. Her pulse pounded as she slipped out of bed and moved toward the window. Pushing the curtain aside, she peered outside and froze. A shadow stood near the fountain. For a moment, she thought it was her imagination. But no, the figure was real, tall, motionless, watching. Miguel. Her breath caught in her throat. He was there. Or was he? His face was obscured by the darkness. But she knew that stance, that presence. Emily turned quickly, reaching for her robe, ready to run outside, to find him, to demand answers, to know that he was real. But when she turned back to the window, he was gone. A cold chill ran down her spine. Was it really him? Or was guilt playing tricks on her mind? The next morning she stepped into the garden, expecting to find footprints in the damp soil, some sign that he had been there. Nothing. But as she stood by the fountain, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. A single red rose, freshly cut, placed at the edge of the stone bench where they used to sit together. Her hands trembled as she reached for it, her mind swirling with questions. Had Miguel returned? Or was this David's way of reminding her that she would never escape what she had done? Emily sat in the garden, staring at the single red rose in her trembling hands. Had Miguel really come back? Or was this some twisted message from David? The uncertainty gnawed at her. The days that followed were suffocating. David had returned to his usual routine. Business meetings, late nights at the office, expensive dinners with clients. On the surface, everything appeared normal, but Emily knew better. She wasn't free. David never raised his voice, never accused her, but his control over her had tightened like an invisible chain. The way he looked at her, the way he spoke, always measured, always calm, made her feel like she was living inside a prison with no bars. Every aspect of her life was under quiet surveillance. The house staff watched her movements. Her credit cards had restrictions she had never noticed before. Even her phone calls felt monitored, as if someone was always listening. David hadn't just erased Miguel. He had erased Emily's ability to fight back. One evening, she tried to push back. "I want to go visit my sister for a few days," she said casually over dinner. David didn't even look up from his steak. "Why?" Emily forced a smile. "I just need some time away." David took a sip of his wine, setting the glass down with deliberate slowness. "I don't think that's necessary." Something about the way he said it made her blood run cold. She swallowed hard. "David!" He finally met her gaze. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held something dark, something final. "You have everything you need here," he said softly. And just like that, the conversation was over. Emily sat frozen, realization settling deep in her bones. She wasn't just trapped in this marriage. She was trapped in his world, a world where disobedience had consequences, a world where people disappeared without explanation. And the worst part, she had no idea what had happened to Miguel, or if she would be next. Sleep no longer came easily to Emily. Every night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of unseen eyes watching her. The house was too quiet, too perfect, as if it were holding its breath. And then there were the whispers. At first she thought it was her imagination, a faint sound like the wind slipping through the cracks of the old house. But the more she listened, the more certain she became. Someone was there. One night, unable to bear it any longer, she climbed out of bed and tiptoed through the darkened halls. The whispers grew louder as she neared the back of the house, toward the glass doors leading to the garden. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the handle. She stepped outside, the night air cool against her skin. The garden was bathed in silver moonlight, the fountain trickling softly. And then she saw it, a shadow just beyond the rose bushes. Emily's breath hitched. "Miguel," she whispered, her voice barely audible. No response. Her heart pounded as she stepped forward, drawn to the darkness, to the possibility that he was still out there. But before she could take another step, a hand clamped over her mouth. She gasped, struggling, her body stiffening with fear. A familiar voice whispered into her ear. "Shh, mi amor. Don't scream." Her whole body went still. It was him, Miguel. Her pulse thundered in her chest as he slowly removed his hand, allowing her to turn. And there he was, alive, real. His face was leaner, his eyes sharper, his body tense with something she couldn't quite place. Relief flooded through her. "I thought they tried to make me disappear," he interrupted, his voice low and urgent. "But I came back for you." Emily's stomach twisted. "Who?" "David." Miguel's jaw tightened. "See, but I'm not afraid of him." He reached for her hand, his grip strong, unwavering. "Are you?" Emily opened her mouth to speak, but a sound from inside the house made her freeze. A slow creak, a presence, David, watching, waiting. Emily turned to Miguel, her mind racing. She knew in that moment that there were only two options left: stay or run. Emily's breath came in short, shallow gasps. Miguel's hand tightened around hers, warm and calloused, grounding her in the moment. But inside the house, the weight of David's presence loomed like a storm cloud. They didn't have much time. "We have to go. Now," Miguel whispered, his voice urgent. Emily's mind raced. She wanted to run, to leave everything behind and disappear into the night. But she knew David. He wasn't the type of man you simply ran from. If they left now, he would come after them. And when he found them, because he would find them, there would be no second chances. She swallowed hard, gripping Miguel's hand. "We can't just leave like this. He'll hunt us down." Miguel's jaw clenched. "I've been watching him, Emily. He's careful, but not invincible." She shook her head. "You don't understand. David doesn't just let go of what's his." Miguel's dark eyes burned into hers. "Are you his?" The question hit her like a slap. For years, she had lived under David's shadow. bound by golden chains, trapped in a marriage that had long lost its warmth. But she wasn't his, not anymore. Emily's hand trembled in Miguel's grip. "What do we do?" Miguel exhaled slowly. "We outsmart him." He pulled something from his pocket, a key. Emily frowned. "What's that?" "The back gate. I kept a spare before I left. There's an old truck waiting on the side road. If we time this right, we can be out of here before he even knows you're gone." Her pulse pounded. It was reckless, dangerous, but it was their only chance. A noise inside the house made them both freeze. Footsteps, slow, calculated. David was coming. Miguel turned to her. "Emily, now or never." She looked at him, at the man who had risked everything to come back for her. And in that moment, she made her choice. She squeezed his hand. "Let's go." Together, they disappeared into the darkness. Emily and Miguel moved swiftly through the shadows, their footsteps muffled by the damp earth. The garden, once a place of forbidden love, had become their only chance of escape. The back gate was just ahead. Miguel pulled Emily close, whispering, "Stay behind me." Her heart pounded as he slid the key into the lock. It clicked open with a soft snap. Freedom was just beyond the gate. But then, a voice cut through the darkness. "Going somewhere, darling?" Emily's breath caught in her throat. "David." He stood a few feet away, his silhouette barely illuminated by the dim garden lights. In one hand he held a glass of whiskey, calm and composed. But in his other hand, a gun. Emily froze. Miguel stepped in front of her. "Let her go." David chuckled, taking a slow sip of his drink before lowering the glass. His grip on the gun, however, remained firm. "Oh, Miguel." His voice was almost affectionate. "I gave you a chance to walk away, and yet here you are." Miguel didn't move. "She doesn't belong to you." David sighed, shaking his head. "That's where you're wrong." His gaze flickered to Emily. "Tell him, sweetheart. Tell him what we both know." Emily clenched her fists. For years, David had controlled her with his wealth, his power, his quiet, insidious threats. But this was different. This was life or death. Her voice was shaky but firm. "I'm leaving, David." His expression darkened. "You think you can just walk away?" He took a slow step forward. "After everything I've done for you? After everything I've given you?" Emily swallowed hard. "You never gave me freedom." David's jaw twitched. "That's because you don't deserve it." And then he raised the gun. Everything happened in an instant. Miguel lunged forward. A gunshot rang out, shattering the silence. Emily screamed. Miguel tackled David to the ground, the gun skidding across the stone pathway. They struggled, fists colliding, grunts of pain cutting through the night air. Emily didn't think. She moved. She ran to the gun, her fingers curling around the cold metal. David shoved Miguel off and scrambled to his feet. His eyes met hers. A silent moment passed. Then, Emily raised the gun and aimed it at her husband. David's expression shifted, a flicker of something unreadable in his cold blue eyes. "Go ahead," he murmured. "Do it." Emily's hands trembled. Could she? Could she end this nightmare right here, right now? Miguel stepped beside her, his breathing ragged. "Emily," David took a slow step forward. "You don't have it in you." Emily's grip tightened, and then she turned the gun to the ground and fired. The shot echoed through the night, shattering the tense silence. David stilled. Emily met his gaze, her voice steady. "I won't be like you." For the first time, something like surprise crossed his face. She threw the gun into the bushes, grabbed Miguel's hand, and bolted through the open gate. This time, David didn't stop her. But she knew this wasn't over. Not yet. The cold night air hit Emily like a slap as she and Miguel sprinted down the dirt road. The world outside the estate felt vast and unfamiliar. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Miguel's grip on her hand was tight, his pace urgent. "The truck's just ahead," he said between breaths. Emily didn't look back. She didn't dare. When they reached the vehicle, a rusted old pickup hidden behind a cluster of trees, Miguel wrenched the door open and helped Emily inside before climbing into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life. Miguel slammed the gas pedal. Gravel kicked up behind them as they sped away from the estate, the mansion shrinking in the rearview mirror. Emily pressed her hands against her temples, her body trembling. "We did it," she whispered, but the words felt hollow. Had they really escaped? Or had they just delayed the inevitable? Miguel's grip tightened on the steering wheel. His knuckles were white. "We need a plan." Emily turned to him, her heart still racing. "David won't stop." Miguel nodded. "I know." The weight of the truth settled between them. David had power, influence, resources. A man like him wouldn't simply let her disappear. Emily stared out the window, the darkened landscape blurring past. "We need to go somewhere he can't find us." Miguel glanced at her. "I know a place. It's not fancy, but it's safe." Emily met his eyes. "I don't care about fancy. I just want to be free." Miguel gave a small, reassuring nod, but the tension in his jaw didn't ease. They drove for hours, the city fading into nothingness as they ventured deeper into the countryside. The air smelled of rain and earth, the kind of scent that made Emily feel like she could breathe again. But deep down, she knew. David wasn't the kind of man to let things go. And the moment he realized she was truly gone, he would come looking. And this time, he wouldn't be so forgiving.